Right now, there is over $4.5 trillion sitting inside Australia's superannuation system. And yet, most Australians have no idea whether their own super balance is ahead, behind, or completely off track for their age. So, today, we're going to answer one of the most searched financial questions in the country. At what age do most Aussies actually hit $100,000, $500,000, and $1 million inside their super? I've pulled the latest data from the ATO, ASFA, and APRA, and the answers might surprise you. Whether you're 25 or 55, this is the video that shows you exactly where you stand. Let's start with the first big milestone, $100,000. When you're starting out, $100,000 in super feels like a mountain. Your balance is small, your contributions trickle in, and it feels like it barely moves from year to year. But $100,000 is the number where everything changes. Because once your balance hits six figures, compounding stops being a theory and starts becoming something you can actually see. Below $100,000, most of your growth comes from employer contributions going in. Above $100,000, your investment returns start generating real momentum on their own. So when does the typical Australian actually get there? According to the latest ATO figures, the average male super balance crosses $100,000 in the 35 to 39 bracket, landing at $101,642. For women, it takes a bit longer. The average female super balance doesn't cross $100,000 until the 40 to 44 age bracket, where it reaches $117,067. But here's the catch. Those are averages, and averages get pulled up by people at the very top with massive balances. The median tells a more honest story. For everyone aged 40 to 44, the median super balance is $100,330. So the typical Australian in their early 40s is sitting right on the $100,000 line. And the all ages median across the country is just $63,339. Against an average of $182,781. The average runs nearly 3 times the median, which tells you how skewed this system is at the top. So if you're in your 30s or early 40s and you haven't hit $100,000 yet, you're not alone. You're actually right in line with where most Australians sit. But the earlier you can cross that line, the more time compounding has to do the heavy lifting for you over the decades ahead. Now let's move to the second milestone, and this is where it starts to get uncomfortable. $500,000. Because the reality is that most Australians never reach $500,000 in super during their working life. The average male balance at age 55 to 59 is $341,115. At age 60 to 64, right when most people are retiring or about to retire, it climbs to $413,700, still well short of $500,000. It's not until the 70 to 74 age bracket that the average male balance finally pushes past the $500,000 mark, landing at $516,393. And that's only the average. The median for that same age group is $227,982, less than half of it. For women, the picture is even tougher. The average female super balance at age 60 to 64 is $327,440. It peaks at $484,818 for women aged 75 and over. That means, on average, Australian women never actually hit $500,000 in super at any point in their lifetime. And this gap between men and women isn't random, it's structural. Women are more likely to take career breaks for caregiving. They work part-time at higher rates. They earn less on average across most industries, and they live longer, which means their super has to stretch further. The result is a retirement gap of more than $86,000 between men and women at age 60 to 64, at the exact moment when that money matters most. Now, why does $500,000 matter so much? Because of the ASFA Comfortable Retirement Standard. This is the benchmark that tells you how much you need to fund a genuinely comfortable retirement in Australia. Dining out, domestic travel, health insurance, and the occasional overseas trip. As of the latest ASFA figures, that standard requires $630,000 for a single person and $730,000 for a couple. Both of those numbers are well above $500,000. And the average Australian isn't even reaching the $500,000 line before retirement. In fact, the honest picture is worse than that. The median Australian arrives at 60 to 64 with $203,326 in super. ASFA says you want around $496,500 by 60 to be on track for comfortable. That's a gap of nearly $300,000 for the typical person. That's a serious gap, and it's why understanding where you sit right now matters so much. The earlier you know the gap exists, the more time you have to close it. Now let's talk about the big one, $1 million. This is the milestone everyone dreams about. It's the number that gets thrown around on social media, at dinner parties, in every retirement article you've ever read. But the data tells a very different story from the hype. As of the most recent ASFA figures, roughly 320,000 Australians had super balances above $1 million. That sounds like a lot until you realise there are around 25 million super accounts in the entire country. That puts the $1 million club at roughly 1.3% of all Australians with super, about 1 in every 75 people. So who actually gets there? It's not random. The Australians who reach $1 million in super typically share a few things in common. They've had consistent full-time employment for 30 years or more. They've been on above average incomes for most of that time. They've benefited from strong long-term investment returns, often through growth or high growth options. And in most cases, they've made voluntary contributions on top of what their employer put in. These people didn't stumble into $1 million. They built it deliberately over decades. But here's the part that most people miss when they fixate on $1 million. You don't actually need $1 million to retire comfortably in Australia. The ASFA standard says $630,000 for a single person. That funds a lifestyle most people would genuinely be happy with. And if you're part of a couple, $730,000 combined gets you there. $1 million in super is great, but it's not the requirement, it's the bonus. According to Treasury projections, super millionaires will become more common over the next few decades. By 2060, more than 10% of women are projected to retire with over $1 million in super, up from a tiny fraction today. The combination of the 12% super guarantee running across entire careers, stronger compounding over longer time horizons, and growing financial literacy means the $1 million mark will shift from being exceptional to being achievable for a much larger group of Australians. But that's 2060. If you're planning your retirement in the next 10 to 20 years, the numbers that matter are the ones sitting in your account right now. So the real question isn't whether you'll join the 1.3%. The real question is whether you can close the gap between where you are right now and the $630,000 or $730,000 you actually need. And the good news is that in 2026, there are more tools available to do that than at any point in Australian history. The super guarantee is now at 12%. That's the highest it's ever been, up from 9.5% just a decade ago. Every dollar your employer pays you, 12 cents now flows into your super automatically. Across a full working career, that difference alone adds hundreds of thousands to your final balance compared to the old rate. Payday Super is now live. It started on the 1st of July this year, so your employer has to get your super into your fund within 7 business days of each payday instead of once a quarter. That means your money gets invested sooner and starts compounding from day one of every pay cycle. And if you want to accelerate things further, salary sacrificing even $50 a week into your super makes a massive difference. At a long-term average return of 7.5% per year, $50 a week from age 30 to 67 turns into roughly $350,000 in additional super. That's on top of your employer contributions. And because it's pre-tax money going in at just 15%, you pay less tax along the way. If you're a lower income earner, the government will match your after-tax super contribution through the co-contribution scheme. For the 2026 to 27 financial year, you get the full benefit if you earn under $49,293, and it phases out completely at $64,293. Put in $1,000 and they'll add up to $500. That's a 50% instant return with zero investment risk. So here's the bottom line. Most Australians hit $100,000 in super somewhere in their late 30s to early 40s. Most never reach $500,000 during their working life, and $1 million remains something only about 1 in 75 Australians achieve. But a comfortable retirement doesn't require $1 million. It requires a plan, consistent action, and starting before you think you're ready. If this changed how you think about your super, do me a favor and hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. I'll see you there.